we can't make progress because too many of our country's rules and institutions were designed to exclude Black people. We need real change. It's time to eliminate the filibuster, make D.C. a state, seriously fix the Supreme Court, and abolish the Electoral College. We must vote in November, but we need a plan of action now. It's time to finally build a true, equal, and just democracy.
Paid for by Just Democracy.
When it comes to what's happening in this country and around the world, the best podcast you can listen to is The Buck Sexton Show. Hey, it's Buck Sexton here. We are in the height of an election season that will determine the future of the country. Who are you going to listen to? Who can you trust? Who could have thought that when people told Democrats they had to treat Wisconsin like a battleground, they would take it quite so literally? iHeartRadio is #1 for podcasts, and it's easy to see why. Listen to The Buck Sexton Show on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Newt. Due to the virus, I'm recording from home, so you may notice a difference in audio quality. On this episode of Newt's World, I'm really excited to talk about something I know a lot about personally. Back when I developed the contract with America, I knew that it was vital to have a team commitment and a team effort, to have a big enough idea that you could attract people to pay attention. And that's why this year, watching Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy develop his commitment to America, I really saw a parallel to what I had done back in 1994. Leader McCarthy's commitment to America is a set of key promises, including restoring our way of life, rebuilding the greatest economy in history, and renewing the American dream. This election is about socialism versus freedom, and is the most important election, I think, since 1864. I am pleased to welcome Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who proudly serves California's 23rd District and is currently the Republican leader in the U.S. House of Representatives. Kevin was first elected to Congress in 2006 and is a native of Bakersfield and a fourth-generation Kern County resident. The grandson of a cattle rancher and the son of a firefighter, Kevin grew up in a working-class family and is committed to preserving and promoting the American dream for hardworking Americans. I am delighted to have a friend of many, many years, going all the way back to a brief period he had in the U.S. House, working on House Administration Committee, to the period where he was, as a freshman, the leader of the Republicans in Sacramento in the Assembly, to his rise as a member of the House, where he played a key role in 2010 as Speaker Boehner regained the majority with a pledge to America. So I know that Kevin McCarthy knows about every aspect of the contract with America, the pledge to America, and he's now developed, for this day and age, a very powerful approach, which has been called the commitment to America, in which he's gotten House Republicans to sign up to. And it draws a very, very sharp contrast with where the Democrats have been and where Pelosi and the Harris-Biden ticket would take them. Let me say welcome, Kevin. Why don't you start by sharing with people what you think the commitment means and why you think it's really important?
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity and the years of friendship. Let me tell you a little bit about it. You need to go back 2 years ago. Remember what happened. 2 years ago, Nancy Pelosi was elected Speaker, and she made this promise to the majority. She told the country that the majority that she would serve with the responsibility to seek common ground. Well, now we have a record. She did the opposite. And I asked the country, name me one problem this Democrat majority in the House has solved. Name me any of her results. And I believe no matter what you do before the American public, you need to tell them and you need to make a commitment to them what you would do with that majority if they would trust you. I lay it out in 3 big sections. The first one is we want to restore our way of life. And you cannot restore our way of life until we defeat the virus and keep America healthy. So we make a commitment to the American public that we're going to triple the COVID testing. and develop a vaccine that is safe and effective that is available this year. We'll cut drug prices, we'll make therapeutics go up, and we'll end the surprise billing, and we will protect pre-existing conditions. But you can't restore our way of life by just defeating the virus, because what we have going on in the streets of America. We need to ensure the safety and security of our communities. And this is where there's a great contrast for a decision to be made this November. While we watch what is happening in our cities, Compton in my home state, where an individual walked up and shot 2 sheriffs in the head. It's not, should we defund the police? We actually should spend more. We make a commitment that we'd spend $1.75 billion more for better police training, community policing, and to purchase 500,000 more body cameras. And the last part, to really restore our way of life, we need to preserve those freedoms under the Constitution. So we make a commitment where we're going to uphold free speech. People have a right to be heard. But we also have a right to make sure we protect the religious liberties. We defend the unborn and we safeguard the Second Amendment. That's the part that you start to restore our way of life. But how do we rebuild going through the number of jobs that we lost? We're going to rebuild the greatest economy in our history. We've done it once, and we know we could do it again. So we make a direct pledge to this country that we will get America working, and we will add 10 million new good-paying jobs. We have a plan that shows you how to do that. Through tax proposals, opportunity zones, expending the $2,000 child tax credit, but really focusing on the small businesses that have been hurt so far. And we're going to do this by ending our dependency on China. We're going to bring that supply chain back to America, which increases more U.S. manufacturing jobs. And then what we need to do is upgrade and modernize the American infrastructure. We're going to bring high-speed internet to every household, and we realize how important that is today now, especially with education. We have a 5-year plan to fix our roads, our airports, our bridges. We want to renew the American dream. And the best way to do that, which you have really been a person that advocated for this forever, to make sure that every child in every neighborhood can attend an excellent school, allowing the students to go to the school that the parents believe is best for them. We need to honor our veterans. We expand the VA choice bill. But the other thing we do, we guarantee any veteran that wants a job will have one. Then we also support our citizens' success by expanding career and technical education. If we do that, if we restore our way of life, if we rebuild the greatest economy in history, and we renew the American dream, we will reunite this country. And every election, and every November, people have a decision to make, and they have something to weigh to both sides. What is the agenda if they have no results for their majority? They do say the Democrats want to defund the police. You have AOC putting it out there. Dismantle America. What did they do? They wasted their majority on an impeachment because they didn't agree with who won the election. The Democrats focused on impeachment when the coronavirus was coming to America. And then they want to destroy our way of life. On the very first day, Joe Biden said he wants to raise taxes. So you have a contrast, but you're at a point in life. And every election is important, but we know with this is much different. It's not Republican versus Democrat anymore. It's almost a socialism versus freedom. And I thought it's very important for the American public to have a very clear discussion. What do you commit to do if you are trusted with the majority?
I want to reinforce what you just said about the importance of this election. Victor Davis Hanson, who's a brilliant classic scholar at Stanford at the Hoover Institution, gave a speech recently in which he said this is actually between civilization and anarchy, and that he never thought that he would be telling us that Donald Trump was the key to preserving civilization. But if you look at the other side right now, and as you said in Compton, it wasn't just that somebody walked up and shot the 2 sheriff's deputies in the head. It was the crowd that gathered at the emergency room entrance and chanted, "Let them die." And I think in that sense, this is an unbelievably important election. Now, when you go out and you start explaining all this, obviously Republicans like it, hardcore left-wing Democrats don't like it, but there's a huge block in the middle that really isn't quite sure what they're doing. What are the things they ask you about your commitment?
The number one thing they ask, when they look at it, they want their life to go back to what they knew it was before the COVID. They knew America was the strongest in economy ever before, and it didn't matter what color of skin you were or what age you were. But then they're sitting back and they're watching that not only was it the COVID, now they're concerned whether it's even safe to go down their streets. They're watching night after night after night in these major cities where they're wondering if the police could even come and protect them. When they really start having an in-depth discussion about it, they begin to realize that it didn't happen just yesterday. It happened when they voted for what they thought was a nice person, but had these very socialist beliefs in a DA. That now in America, why do you question what's right or wrong? That if somebody loots you, now that's not wrong if they needed something. And they're wondering where in this country did that happen? Where was that debate taking place? And then they watch these mayors and they watch the Speaker of the House when somebody riots say, people do what they will do. When will somebody stand up that the rule of law is equal for all? And they also talk about, and this is what we talk about in here with police reform, George Floyd should not have been treated that way. He should be alive today. That's why we deal with every single issue in front of us. And they look to the Democrats at this moment and say, I've watched your 2 years. There's no results. What are you promising to do next?
Good morning. This is Laura Vanderkam, host of The New Corner Office, a podcast where we share strategies for thriving in the new world of work. I just put out a new episode about how to light a fire under your career by making your Mondays matter. The episode was fueled by Nature Valley Packed Sustained Energy Bars. Here's a clip from the episode. So here's my suggestion if you're working at home these days because of the pandemic. Use the time on Monday morning that you would have spent commuting to tackle some big, speculative project that you claim you never have time for. Tackling something big and uncertain can light a fire under your career. And doing this important but not urgent task first thing means you start the week with a sense of victory. Brought to you by Nature Valley Packed Sustained Energy Bars. For more tips on how to start well, sustain your energy, and win the week, check out the New Corner Office podcast. Available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, it's Buck Sexton here. We are in the height of an election season that will determine the future of the country. Who are you going to listen to? Who can you trust? Join me in the Freedom Hut, the one place where you know you'll get the straight story from a conservative perspective. Joe Biden, somebody who's been a machine politician, the Democrat Party from Delaware for longer than I've been alive. And nobody thought he was impressive. No one thought he had great leadership until about 5 minutes ago. They're trying to fool you. They're trying to pull off a con, a fraud against America. And Joe Biden is the con man in chief. The biggest names and the heaviest hitters in politics, trust me.
So we've done a lot, Buck, and we have some great support. Your viewpoint is very important to me. Very, very important. That's how we got to know each other.
Buck Sexton, formerly of the CIA.
Buck, it's great to be back on the Buck Sexton Show.
iHeartRadio is #1 for podcasts, and it's easy to see why. Listen to the Buck Sexton Show on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
This entire effort to elect anti-police, pro-criminal district attorneys has just had a devastating effect because it puts back on the street the very person who you just arrested, who then is emboldened because they know you're not going to be able to keep them. And so they go back out. They had a guy in Portland this last week who had set a fire in the middle of all this terrible fire season. They picked him up, booked him, released him because they have a system where you normally don't get bail. And the next day he set 6 different fires. I think this time they actually kept him locked up. But it's this whole rotating system now where even if the police do their job, the district attorneys very often will not support or reinforce the law, but instead let people out. And you have this in Los Angeles, you have it even more in San Francisco in terms of the district attorney there who is a very hard-line, pro-Venezuelan dictatorship, pro-Castro kind of left-winger. And I think somehow we've got to get across to people that these policies have consequences. But a lot of what we're seeing not work is a function of policies that were just wrong. And I think that's part of why I like what you're doing here, because you're laying out a plan which allows people to understand the details. I mean, when you talk about opportunity zones, for example, and the ability to really focus on growing areas that have been poor, I think people begin to realize this is something that could work.
You're correct. You know what George Soros has done? And I've watched it in California. Now they want to move it nationally. He's gone into these cities where he's spent millions of dollars on a district attorney race that you've never seen before. You've only heard about these things on a national campaign from San Diego, Contra Costa, and others. And there's two places he focused: district attorneys and secretaries of state. Because he wants to determine when it comes to election law. He wants to determine, especially what you're talking about right now. We just heard from a DA in California who said after there was looting, not to prosecute anybody because they needed it. We now have to determine when someone steals something, if they felt they needed it, it is no longer breaking the law. They don't have the right to do that. We believe in the rule of law. This has been a long-term program by the Democrats. And now we're watching the ramifications of what they have done in these cities that have been just controlled by Democrats. They want to do it on a much larger scale. We have a perfect example. The Democrats, for the number of years, thinking that government can own and control and send you a check, determine that we will change the outcome of your life in the poorest communities of America, or could we give an opportunity zone where private money comes in faster? You get a piece of the pie. You get to move up in the economy. And that we're not going to hold you to a bad school. We're going to let the parent choose. And we're going to give the best school for you to go to.
You're really developing a program of individual responsibility and individual choice, and in a sense taking power back from government and putting it back with individuals. And it strikes me that that's much closer to the original American model, where people went out and pursued the American dream.
I'm in California, and California is a great example because it's a beautiful state. It has everything you would ever want, right? But it also has what the Democrat policies have brought over after a Ronald Reagan, after George Deukmejian had made this such a promising state, right? We now pay 40% higher in electricity. We now have our electricity turned off because they can't provide enough to the grid. But what else we have is an example of what the Democrats say, like everybody should be equal. Well, now we find that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the same rules. So once she got caught of going and getting her hair done, they opened up for everybody else. When they kept the gyms closed and when they finally found out that the only gyms that weren't closed were the government gyms, so the government employees could still go there, now they open up the public ones. So when these socialists tell you it's making it equal for everybody else, it's not always equal. We learned that from the Soviet Union. The elect few still get something more. But I believe in an idea that gives you your own power. It doesn't hold you back to what you can achieve. And what they have done to the school districts to hold people back, what they are now trying to do to the rule of law of making our streets not safe, this is a much different election than we've had in the last century.
Whether it was in reaction to Trump or just because of the gradual evolution of the system, the degree of their power grab is much greater now. I mean, when you see a governor such as in Nevada who says it's okay to get together at a casino, but you can't get together at a church. Well, that's virtually a dictatorship. He's telling you what you can and can't do with no reference to the rule of law and no reference to individual liberty. And it seems to me that what you're trying to do with this kind of a commitment is get us back to a country where people have choices within a framework of law and where the workforce has the right kind of education and where there are incentives to create jobs so people actually can work their way to a dramatically better future without having to rely on government. That's an enormous gap between where the Democrats are and where we are.
I'm going to tell you a personal conversation I had with my governor, Gavin Newsom. During this pandemic, Gavin Newsom shuts everything down. As we begin to phase out of it, he makes a rule about restaurants opening up, and he bases it upon square footage for social distancing, which I believe is fair. restaurant per restaurant. How large you are is how many people you can have based upon square footage. He then later makes a decision about whether you can go to church. And he makes a uniform decision. Regardless of the size of your church, you can only have 100 people in it. So I text him and say, I need to talk to you. He has his chief of staff call me and the secretary of health. And I ask him a question, how did you determine for restaurants? And they said, we base that on square footage for the science and social distance. I said, did you use that same for churches? No. They want to pick and choose. And I said, last time I read the Constitution, I didn't see anything in there about restaurants, but I believe it had religious freedom in there.
And what's their reaction when you say that? Because I've been amazed at their willingness to run over religious liberty.
It's almost internally, they don't care. They're going to take this moment in time. And when the protests came, there is a video. It's shoulder to shoulder for a mile long of people down in L.A. protesting. You will not hear one question about that coming to a spread. In New York, de Blasio told them you cannot track and trace if somebody comes in and has COVID, asking if they've gone to a protest. You cannot ask them. They view that as different. Another discussion I had with Gavin Newsom, these churches have daycare. So during the week, they could provide daycare for a number of children. But on Sunday, we cannot meet. So I guess COVID only comes on Sunday. It's almost to the point that they're putting their own personal beliefs forward. That's why in the commitment to America, we put in, we will preserve our freedoms under the Constitution because we're going to uphold free speech. You can go protest. Your voice needs to be heard, pro or con. But we're also going to protect your religious liberties, and we're going to defend the unborn, and we're going to safeguard the Second Amendment. If you go to any store that is able to sell a gun, there is a line around. And the interesting part is, it is the housewives and the young women that are wondering, do they need to buy a gun to protect themselves because they do not feel safe and secure in their own neighborhoods?
Candace Owens just knocked out Cardi B and poked the biggest hole yet in the stranglehold entertainment and media have on the minds of black voters in this country. I'm Rob Smith, and on the next episode of Rob Smith is Problematic, we are going to break down why the left uses idiots to reach black America and how Candace Owens just put them all on notice that they cannot do it anymore. Listen to Rob Smith is Problematic on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
What are you sensing as you go around the country? Because I know that you have been directly involved with every single Republican candidate for Congress. What do you sense as you talk to them around the country?
I am watching this grow like never before. You saw this happen before anybody would see it in 1994 because it doesn't happen on that November day. It happens almost a year or two before. Take, for instance, who would actually put their name on the line to run? Okay, the record for women running as Republicans was 143. This cycle, we had 229 women running as Republicans. Now, you know the challenge is you first have to win the primary to be able to win the general. The record for women winning a primary was in 2004. There was 53 women won the primary. Do you know how many women we have today who won the primary? 95. 32% of the 53 most challenged races that I have are going to have women as a representative of Republican. I have more than 75 minority candidates, something we have not seen in the Republican Party at any given time. And what's interesting as we battle through making sure we're a more perfect union, the country has not studied where did Jim Crow law come from. And I love that how much you love history, and I know you write so many books. I want to collaborate with you, and I want to write a book, What If Lincoln Was Not Assassinated? Think for one moment. Would we have ever had Jim Crow laws? They were created because the 23 black Republicans getting elected to Congress, the Democrats in the South decided that was wrong and made it more difficult for people of color to even register. But what we're finding today across this nation, I have more veterans, more minorities, more women than at any given time running as Republicans, and it's the belief that you have in the individual rights. It's the belief that this country is more than a country, that it's an idea, and the challenge that they have never seen before, that it's not a Republican versus Democrat. Kennedys can no longer win a primary in a Democratic Party. This has now become the party of an AOC and a Tlaib, a woman who was born in Somalia, put in a refugee camp, and then what does America do? She opens her arms in her greatness and brings her in to become a citizen. And then she gets elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. Less than 11,000 people have ever had the ability to be a member of Congress, right? And what does she say? We should dismantle this nation instead of duplicate this nation. That's the fundamental philosophy of what we're debating today.
You raised a really interesting idea. I would love to someday co-author some books with you, but I have a hunch you're going to have a long stretch as Speaker of the House before then, and that will keep you rather busy getting all of these things done. I'm very impressed. I've watched this develop over the last couple of years, and I've watched the energy building in the House Republican Party. Now, if people listening to this decide they want to be helpful, where do they go and what can they do to be helpful in this quest?
The first thing I want everybody to do is go to commitmenttoamerica.com. Read through it, because this isn't just something we're putting on paper. We are making a commitment to you because we are committed to this nation. We will not leave if we win or lose this election. That's not who we are. We believe in fighting for this nation and fighting for our beliefs, our freedoms, and our Constitution. If you like what you are reading, I then want you to go to one more site, takethehouse.com. Join us. Be a part of something bigger than yourself. And Newt, you love history, and that's one thing I've always admired about you. And you've been to my office. In my office, I have that portrait of Washington crossing the Delaware. Everybody remembers it and sees it, and they know of that painting, the famous painting. And the thing people don't quite realize, that wasn't painted by somebody who watched that event on Christmas in 1776. It was painted by a man named Emanuel Lentz, who was an immigrant who had lived in America and went back to Germany. He wasn't there. He painted it in 1851. And he painted it because he wanted to inspire Germany to have a revolution based upon the values of America believing in the individual. So he gets it historically incorrect, but he puts Washington in a rowboat with 13 people, but he only shows you 12 faces. Well, Washington historians will tell us he crossed in a Durham boat. He has Washington standing up wearing a ceremonial uniform with his hand on his chest. You look at George Washington, you think this man has probably never lost a battle. But history tells us he had never won one yet. That was our first victory when we surprised the Hessians. But go online and look at who's in that boat. When you look at the second rower, he's wearing a beret. He's Scottish. But look at the person directly across from him in the green jacket. He's African American. Come down to the middle of the boat in that red, rowing very feverishly, is a woman. And in the very back is a Native American. I can't tell you from a historical fact if they were in the boat, but this young immigrant who lived here 10 years, that's who he believed would be in the boat. Now, the second to last person is this farmer, and he has his hand across his face. And it's the hand of the 13th person that nobody sees. You see, what Emmanuel was saying, here we are, not even a nation, but an idea about liberty and individual rights and freedom. And we've never won a battle before, but we're willing to risk everything on our holiest of night. Here's a hand. Would you get in and join us? That's as true today as it was then. We need you in the boat together. We need to all row in the same direction. We're going to have choppy waters. We're going to be in fights that people are going to give the odds against us. But come November, we're going to shock the world, and we're going to have a commitment of what we're going to do, and we're going to have a plan, and we're going to carry it out because we will keep our commitment to this nation. And once again, we'll make sure the next century is ours.
That's really well done. I once wrote a book called To Try Men's Souls about that crossing, and I don't think I could have done nearly as good a job of painting the picture you just painted, which is really not a picture about Washington. It's a picture about America, who we can be, and why we represent everyone who believes that we can come together and that we can create a better future. I want to thank you. I want everyone who's listened to us today both to go to the two websites. They're going to be listed on our show page. But in addition, I want them to know that these are big ideas. When we did the contract with America, it changed history. When you helped John Boehner and you put together the pledge in 2010, you guys actually won 10 more seats than we won in 1994. So that was obviously a big idea. And I think now you're back at it again. And I think that this is a very, very important moment in our history. And I think you have captured the essence of it. So I wish you Godspeed and safe travels. Just keep pitching from now to Election Day.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you to my guest, Kevin McCarthy. You can read more about the commitment to America on our show page at newtsworld.com. Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Debbie Myers, and our producer is Garnsey Slump. The artwork for the show was created by Steve Penley. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. Please email me with your questions at gingrich360.com/questions. I'll answer a selection of questions in future episodes. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcasts and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World.
When it comes to what's happening in this country and around the world, the best podcast you can listen to is The Buck Sexton Show. Hey, it's Buck Sexton here. We are in the height of an election season that will determine the future of the country. Who are you going to listen to? Who can you trust? Who could have thought that when people told Democrats they had to treat Wisconsin like a battleground, they would take it quite so literally? iHeartRadio is #1 for podcasts, and it's easy to see why. Listen to The Buck Sexton Show on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Candace Owens just knocked out Cardi B and poked the biggest hole yet in the stranglehold entertainment and media have on the minds of black voters in this country. I'm Rob Smith, and on the next episode of Rob Smith is Problematic, we are going to break down why the left uses idiots to reach black America and how Candace Owens just put them all on notice that they cannot do it anymore. Listen to Rob Smith is Problematic on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.